Hi, welcome to the Music City Drive-In. I'm Eric, and I have the fortunate privilege today to speak to Morgan King and Phillip Gelatt, the directors of The Spine of the Night, and Larry Fessenden, who is a well-versed actor who I think many of you will recognize. How are you all doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
All right. So I immediately am curious. This is the first time I'm getting to speak to directors of an animated feature. And this one is unique in several of its own rights. We haven't really had an animated feature like this, I don't think. And when we have it, and it hasn't been this adult. Um, so I was kind of hoping that you guys could talk to me a little bit about uh, what this movie is to you and why it's so unique.
Oh man. I guess I'd like to think. Well, it's an independent feature first. Like an independent animated feature just is inherently pretty rare. And I think if it feels unique in that sense, it's because we were able to make it without any guardrails, really. Like we were, there weren't. We had no notes. There were no producers who wanted us to make it broader or to sanitize the vision we'd had for this world in any way. It was purely our passions and our ids. I think all came together to make something that was exactly what we wanted in as uncompromising a way as possible. And it took a lot of trust and a lot of time to make that happen. But if it has that quality, I think that is surely the origin.
Mhm. So what kind of the animation here is not just your typical, like, this feels like rotoscoped,
Yes.
like the sort of animation you see in Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings and things like that. What was the decision to go with this style of imagery?
Well, I'd been doing short films for a couple of years prior to this, prior to starting on this, so 2011, 2012. And I'd always loved those. Ralph Bakshi's films are my favorites as a child, and then I continued to go back to them over my whole life. So when I finally had the opportunity to make films. It was a thing that I missed existing in the world. And so I just continue to do short films in that style, try to figure out how to reverse engineer the Fire and Ice process. On the DVD, you can see the making of, and I was sort of looking to see
Oh,
what he did and trying to figure it out as best as I could in my living room. And then eventually one of those made its way in front of Phil, and he reached out to me.
Yeah, so I saw Morgan's short film Exordium, which, as he just said, was rotoscoped, and again, immediately reminded me of something that I hadn't seen in ages. And I was, heavy metal, Fire and Ice, all that stuff, had a similar effect on my teenage years and youth. So I immediately was like, oh, this whoever the crazy person is who made this short film, I would like to work with them. And so I sent, just out of the blue, sent Morgan an email. And at the time, I had done some screenwriting. I'd written a movie called Europa Report and had made a movie called The Bleeding House, and was just feeling generally annoyed at my Hollywood career, and thought, oh, I'll go work with this weirdo, and we'll make a crazy fantasy film that nobody else would let us make. So yeah.
so
So
was
we
it
did.
gratifying, the sort of freedom that came with working on a project without the sort of restraints that you typically have?
Yes, there's a lot of things that are experimental about this movie, but one of them is, in my mind, the experiment, and I mean this somewhat facetiously, of like, what happens if you make a movie without producer notes? Like, what, like, is it better, or is it, or what would happen if you were never told, given the sort of standard set of notes? And I think it has been a successful experiment in that sense, both in terms of the appeal of the process. Is just, it's a much freer way of making a movie, and then also in terms of the output. I think the movie would be much different if we had tried to. Well, first of all, we never would have gotten a studio or a streamer or anybody. We would have, to do the movie in the way that we did it. Just, it would have been impossible. Like, nobody would have said yes. And even
It
if they
seems
had,
like
I think, yeah, even if they had, by the time we got it made, it would have invariably been sort of a bastardized sort of, somewhat sanitized version of what we ended up with. So yeah, I mean, it was one of the best processes I've gone through in making a movie, certainly.
Excellent. And Mr. Fessenden, what brought you to this project? You have a long history of genre films and several different little things.
Well, they found me. They emailed and said, would I be interested in doing a voice part for this fantastic project? And I was aware of, I'd seen a little clip of it at a studio that I happened to pass through, was doing a project there. And I saw the process. They were putting sound to it. And so I immediately had an affection for the project because I love rotoscoping and some of the movies we've been referencing and any kind of animation. And, this was during COVID, their first lockdown, way back in the day. And it was a great gig as an actor. You're sitting around feeling sorry for yourself and the world. And you realize, oh, I can make some art. So these guys got me on the line. They sent me a microphone. I went into my closet where it was relatively quiet and we did the part. So it was a great thing. It was a blessing at the time. Of course, they've been working for 6.5 years on the project, but I put in my 2 hours. I suffered.
Okay. So I ask the question for audiences of this movie, what are you hoping that they'll take away from it? But also, in addition to that, from the directors, Larry, if you could speak a little bit about the character you got to voice and how you felt about that character having kind of brought it to life.
Well, I'll just speak first because I have a brief thing to say, which is that I was literally played the Prophet of Doom, which is a wonderful character in every, it's a traditional character in movies and these kind of stories all the way back to Shakespeare, where somebody's telling somebody's being hysterical. Mm-hmm. And so it was a fun kind of character to play because you know that they'll have a singular moment in the movie where they're saying we're doomed. And the animation was already there, so that was a fun character that I had to sort of find voice for. And then there's a bit of lines off camera, so we did some riffing and yet further echoing voice of the Doom Sayer. So it was just good times.
Cool.
I love the off-camera lines. I wasn't there for the voice recording session, just because technological limitations of how many people do you get on the same call. But it was when it came in and it was slotting into the film, and it gets me every time when he's off camera yelling to skin the scholars alive. It's absolutely my favorite part when I watch it now. What do I want people to take away from it is, there's a lot, both from I hope that it has a lot more thematics than people generally would get. I love Fire and Ice deeply, but it doesn't have a lot of subtext, except maybe the weird incestuous relationship between the wizard and his mom. But which is, I've always thought was weird how they played that. In a larger sense, the thing that's exciting to me is that I hope people will be turned on to this kind of world, this kind of fantasy world that they might not have seen before. I think a lot of younger audiences don't really know who Ralph Bakshi is. And probably haven't seen a lot of rotoscope animation either. So I hope it opens doors to all of the paths that we're connected to. But I also hope it's can be part of a larger conversation about where independent animation could go. There's a lot of tools and there's a lot of ways to make weird styles and weird worlds and strange independent projects that don't have to look like a popular anime. They don't have to look like a popular Pixar movie. The options are limitless if you want to make a weird style and then spend 7 years meticulously working on it, but or hopefully faster. So
is that how long this production took for you? It's 7 years.
Yeah, we started early 2014.
that's, I mean, part of the reason we were able to do it independently was because we were such a small, such a small team, which then of course means it takes a very, very long time to finish what you're doing. So yeah.
Well, that's one of the big things. I mean, like, it's hard enough to make a movie. So congratulations to all of you as a team, just kind of to have finished something like this on this scale with this consistent of a vision. It's so, it's weird to say much fun while talking about the movie, but it really is. So that's a lot of dedication. So yeah, Mr. Gelatt, what would you say are the main takeaways you hope people have?
Oh, I mean, I certainly agree with Morgan about, I hope that sort of on a broader scale, it introduces people to the idea of independent animation and expands their purview or their opinion of what animation can be. Definitely. I think also akin to that is the issue of like the fantasy genre in general, which I think generally speaking, people hear fantasy, and for a while they thought of Tolkien, which is like elves and dwarves and dragons, and I love that stuff too. And then for a while they would think about Game of Thrones, which is sort of very grounded and very much based in, the history of Europe, but with dragons and elves too. But there are other breeds of fantasy out there. And I think, one of the main appeals to me in this story and working in this vein was to tell a fantasy story that was, deeply connected both to horror and to surrealism and to psychedelia, and more akin to like early 20th century pulp stuff, like almost pre-Tolkien fantasy work, like Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian, or like some of the weirder Clark Ashton Smith stuff, or like Fritz Leiber, or there's just like a whole, or Jack Vance. There's a whole other, there are many other flavors of literary fantasy. So being able to play in those veins and bring those to screen was really exciting. And I hope viewers, I guess I would say this too, like I hope that there are viewers who remember the Bakshi style and this scratches that itch for them. But even more than that, I hope it introduces people to something that they haven't seen before, and that it like expands their taste, and makes them want to find other strange stuff to go enjoy,
Right. So where and when will people be able to watch The Spine of the Night?
So you can watch it now if you want to go rent it on iTunes or Amazon or Vudu or Google Play, or what the many myriad places that you can rent movies. We had a theatrical run that I think is basically over at this point. We played in one tiny theater in Wisconsin this past weekend, but I suspect that will be our last. We were the only non-Spider-Man movie, I'm very proud to say, playing in the theater. And then in February, we're out on Blu-ray. So you can get a fancy Blu-ray that has Morgan's short films up-res to 4K and looking very fancy. It has the behind the scenes on it. And then in March, we will be on Shudder, the Shudder streaming service, for anybody who has that.
Awesome. I have Shudder. Oh, that's cool. Everybody just look out for all of these names for talented people. And thank you all for coming by the Music City Drive-In, and go watch The Spine of the Night now, and then pick it up on Blu-ray.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.